All right, so today we're diving into hairdressing vocational teachers.
Okay.
The folks who take their passion for hair and then turn it into a career shaping young minds.
Right.
I'm really curious about this one because I don't know about you, but when I think like hairdresser, I'm picturing a salon, not so much a classroom.
Yeah, it is an interesting twist, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're so used to thinking about hairdressing as this really hands-on client-facing job.
Right.
But the excerpts that you shared from RoleCatcher really highlight this whole other side of teaching and mentorship.
Yeah, and that's what I love about these deep dives.
Yeah.
We all kind of have this general idea of
Mm.
what a hairdresser does, but like these role catcher details really get into the like nitty gritty.
Right.
The real skills involved in being a hairdressing vocational teacher.
Tot-
It's way more than just, knowing how to do a killer blowout.
Oh, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about it. You're not just like styling hair.
Right.
You're breaking down these really complex techniques into steps that students with like all different experience levels can understand.
Yeah.
And you're explaining like the why behind every single like snipping color choice.
Right.
You're kind of like a hairdresser, a mentor, and an evaluator all at the same time.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But you know what really struck me
What's that?
was it mentions mechanical knowledge as a key skill.
Okay.
Now, I might be showing my ignorance here,
Sure.
but what does mechanics have to do with hairdressing?
That is a great question.
Yeah.
And it really shows how this whole profession is changing.
Yeah.
We're seeing all these like high-tech tools in salons now,
Right.
like digital styling tools that use heat sensors and things like that.
Interesting.
Yeah. Hairdressing vocational teachers need to be comfortable not only using this technology themselves, but then also troubleshooting it
Right?
and explaining it to their students.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, I never even considered that.
Yeah.
So you're telling me that these teachers might have to be as comfortable with like a circuit board as they are with a curling iron?
Exactly.
That's wild.
It makes you think about the future of the whole profession.
Yeah.
Like, will those technical skills be even more important as the technology keeps changing?
Right.
It's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
But, maybe let's back up for a sec and talk about like how you actually become a hairdressing vocational teacher.
Oh.
The source material lays out this really clear progression, like from learner to leader.
Yeah.
And I found it super insightful.
Yeah, it really jumped out at me.
Yeah.
Starting as like an assistant teacher.
Right.
It's almost like an apprenticeship in a way.
Totally.
Where you're getting your hands dirty, observing, learning the ropes.
Yeah, and building your confidence too.
Yeah.
Not even just in your hairdressing skills, but also in your ability to communicate well and manage a classroom.
Right.
And there's this great example in here,
Okay.
this profile of an entry-level hairdressing vocational teacher.
Okay.
And they talk about monitoring student progress and giving feedback, and even making sure that the learning environment is safe and organized.
Wow.
It's a lot to do.
Yeah, no kidding. It sounds like those early years are as much about developing your teaching skills as they are about, like, getting better at hairdressing.
Totally.
But then you move into that intermediate stage.
Right.
And that's where I feel like things get really, really interesting.
Yeah, tell me more about that.
Well, it seems like that's where you start to really, like, take ownership of your teaching.
Yeah, for sure.
The RoleCatcher excerpt mentions developing lesson plans, leading workshops, even collaborating with salons and industry professionals.
Right, you're not just following a curriculum at that point.
Right.
You're like creating it.
Exactly. And there was this quote from the intermediate level profile,
Okay.
and it really stuck with me.
Yeah.
It says, I conduct these really engaging workshops and demonstrations and create this really dynamic learning environment that inspires students.
I love that.
Yeah. And I feel like that's what it's all about, right?
Totally.
Igniting that passion.
Inspiring people. Exactly.
Yes, in the next generation.
For sure. And you can just feel the energy in those words.
Yeah.
Like, it says a lot about the kind of person who's really good at this job.
Right.
Someone who's not just technically skilled, but who also really loves to share their knowledge and watch their students succeed.
So, okay, we've got the eager assistant.
Right.
We've got the passionate instructor.
Yeah.
But what's the view look like from the top?
Right.
What does a senior hairdressing vocational teacher do?
It's like the leadership role. If you've moved past just like mastering the craft,
Okay.
now you're actually like shaping how that craft is taught to like a whole generation of new hairdressers.
So I imagine that's more administrative duties.
Yeah.
Managing other teachers.
Yeah.
Maybe even influencing the curriculum on a larger scale.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the profile we've got for this stage mentions things like managing budgets
Okay.
and working with people in the industry to make sure that the program is current and relevant.
Right.
And even representing the school at conferences.
Wow.
It's a really important job.
I could see why someone would find that appealing.
Yeah,
Especially if they're passionate about the future of the profession.
for sure.
But I have to say, one thing that really stood out to me in all of this material
Okay.
was the emphasis on industry evolution.
Mm.
We talked about technology a little bit earlier,
Right.
but it feels like that's just like the tip of the iceberg.
It's true. New trends and techniques and even products
Right.
are always popping up in the hairdressing world.
Yeah.
And it's so important to stay on top of those trends as a hairdressing vocational teacher.
Because otherwise, you risk teaching your students outdated information,
Exactly.
which is doing them a disservice.
Yeah, and it won't help them when they're trying to get a job.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not just about being a good teacher at that point.
Right.
It's about being a lifelong learner, right?
Totally.
Constantly adapting and evolving as the industry changes.
Absolutely.
That's a pretty big commitment.
Yeah, it is. And speaking of commitment, maybe we should talk about like the pros and cons of this career path.
Okay.
Because the excerpts give a really good overview of both sides
Yeah.
of what it takes to do this job.
Okay. It's funny you should mention both sides of the coin because that's exactly what I was thinking. I mean, on the one hand, you're sharing your passion,
Right.
shaping young minds, maybe even setting your own hours.
Right.
That sounds pretty dreamy.
It does have a certain appeal, right?
It does.
And the excerpts highlight that potential for flexibility,
Right.
especially as you get more and more experience.
Okay.
You might work evenings or weekends to fit with student schedules,
Right.
or even do some freelance work while you're teaching.
Right.
Imagine having that freedom
Yeah.
to be your own boss and also make extra money on the side.
Yeah, that kind of flexibility would be huge for a
Right.
lot of people.
Totally.
But okay, let's be real for a second.
Okay.
No job is perfect, right? The source material also mentions some pretty demanding parts of this job.
Yeah, it can be tough.
Yeah.
And it's not even just about being on your feet all day showing how to do things,
Right.
although that can definitely wear you down over time.
Yeah, for sure.
But remember that list of core abilities we were talking about? Like
yeah.
being a good listener, communicating clearly, thinking critically.
Right.
Those are super important for any teacher,
Yeah.
but even more so when you're teaching a practical skill like hairdressing.
Because you're not just like giving a lecture.
Exactly.
You're constantly watching how people are doing.
Right.
Changing things up based on how they learn best.
Yeah.
Giving everyone individual feedback.
Yeah. It's a lot.
That's exhausting.
Yeah, and then there's that pressure to stay current
Oh, right.
with what's happening in the industry.
Right, all the new trends.
Yes, and all those new technologies.
Yeah.
You know, we were just talking about.
It's like drinking from a fire hose
Totally.
of information.
It really is.
And speaking of information overload,
Yeah.
one thing I noticed
Yeah.
was the sheer number of places a hairdressing vocational teacher could work.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking vocational schools, community colleges, private academies.
Right.
Sometimes even salons have their own training programs.
It's true. There are so many options.
It's a lot.
And that's a really good thing.
Yeah.
If you're thinking about this career path,
Right.
you have a lot of choices.
Totally, because, I mean, a big vocational school,
Mm-hmm.
that's a totally different vibe
Totally.
than like a small private academy.
For sure.
But I will say, no matter where you teach,
Yep.
it's clear that ongoing professional development is essential.
It's so true.
I mean, all the excerpts mention specific certifications.
Right.
Teaching credentials, cosmetology licenses, additional hairdressing certifications.
All of that is super important.
Especially when you think about moving up in your career.
Yeah, tell me more.
Well, let's say you start as an instructor.
Okay.
But maybe you want to be in a leadership position someday.
I like where you're going with this.
Right?
Yeah.
Like maybe even run a whole hairdressing program.
No, that would be amazing.
It would.
To have that kind of influence.
Yeah.
To really shape a program.
Exactly. And I love that the excerpts talk about these kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, it shows you there's room to grow.
Exactly. You're not stuck.
You can really build the career you want.
Yeah. But, you know, we've been talking about all these practical things. It's
Yeah.
like flexibility and demands and certifications.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the less tangible stuff?
What do you mean?
Like the things you can't really measure.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
The things money can't buy.
Exactly. Like think back to those example profiles we were talking about.
Okay.
You could really tell those teachers were proud of what they did.
That's so true.
They weren't just doing hair. They were helping people build careers,
That's amazing.
building their confidence,
Absolutely.
helping them be more creative.
Yeah, and I bet that's even more rewarding
Must be.
when you're working with a skill like hairdressing, where
Yeah.
people can see the progress they're making every day.
Absolutely.
It must feel great
It would.
to see a student transform right in front of you
Yeah.
from someone who's just starting out to a skilled stylist who's ready for anything.
That's awesome.
It's really cool, but just like with any job,
Yeah.
there are always going to be challenges.
Of course, of course.
And you have to wonder,
What's that?
with technology changing so fast,
Yeah.
how will hairdressing vocational teachers need to adapt in the future?
It's a great question.
I mean, we've already talked about how digital tools and techniques are becoming more common.
Right. It's only going to get more intense from here.
Exactly. So that makes you wonder.
What skills will like tomorrow's hairdressing vocational teacher need?
Right.
Will they need to be like coders as much as cutters?
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah.
I mean, we might see this whole new kind of teacher.
Right.
People who are just as comfortable teaching a student how to use some AI styling tool as they are like demonstrating a French braid.
That's wild.
It really is.
It's like this whole fusion of like artistry and technology and teaching all in one.
Yeah, and even like the teaching methods might have to change.
Right.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
This new generation of students,
Yeah.
they've grown up with technology like their whole lives.
Right. They're digital natives.
Exactly. So just standing up and giving a lecture,
Right.
that's not going to cut it anymore.
So are we talking like interactive simulations?
Maybe.
Virtual reality salons?
Possibly.
Maybe even using social media to teach?
Totally.
Wow.
A hairdressing vocational teacher might have to be just as ready to lead a webinar
Right?
on like the latest digital hair trends
Yeah.
as they are to demonstrate a haircut.
It's crazy.
It really is like a whole new world.
You know, when I first started looking into all of this, I have to admit I had a really limited view
Okay.
of what a hairdressing vocational teacher was.
Okay.
But this conversation has been amazing.
It has.
It's really opened my eyes.
What do you think is like the most surprising thing you've learned?
Oh, man.
Mm.
I think just how complex this job is
Totally.
and how much potential it has.
Absolutely. And we've covered so much ground.
We really have.
From like the very basics of the job
Right.
to imagining what it might look like in the future.
Yeah, and we've talked about the skills and the challenges and what makes it rewarding.
And the impact these teachers have.
Yes, and let's not forget all those little aha moments we had along the way.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Like realizing that mechanics is actually a part of modern hairdressing.
Right.
Who knew?
And all the different places you can work.
Yeah, exactly.
It really shows you that there's always something new to learn.
Yeah, it does.
Even about jobs we think we already understand.
Which is awesome.
It is. And, you know, for anyone listening who might be thinking about this career,
Yeah.
I think the biggest takeaway is this.
Okay, let's hear it.
It's not just about being good at doing hair. It's
Yeah.
about loving to teach,
Okay.
always wanting to learn new things,
Right.
and really caring about hairdressing as like an art form.
I love that. And, you know, as technology changes,
Right.
and as beauty standards change,
Yeah.
who knows what exciting things are in store for people who decide to teach hairdressing.
It's an exciting time to be in the field for sure.
That's something to think about.